Hello, I'm Megan Jones, editor at Call Centre Helper, and I'm delighted to be joined by Rob Clarke of Elev-8 Performance to take a closer look at psychological safety, particularly what it takes to achieve it in teams. So, Rob, for anyone who hasn't heard the term, what is psychological safety?
So, firstly, Megan, thanks for inviting me to talk to you today. Psychological safety is something that I think people are hearing more and more about, and there's two answers to your question I want to bring. The first is like a book answer. So the book answer would be that psychological safety is about essentially the environment where in business or in teams or anywhere really where individuals feel comfortable speaking up, sharing ideas, and actually without that kind of fear of failure that maybe you might get in a kind of less psychologically safe environment. Um, there's a longer answer, which I think is bringing it to life. So we've all probably heard of the business Spanx. Hopefully we have. And the kind of the leader of Spanx, the CEO, a woman called Sarah Blakely, she actually introduced something called oops meetings.
Okay.
Um, so you might go, what's an oops meeting? So basically, the concept around an oops meeting was every month employees had to stand up and share their biggest screw up from the past few weeks. So at first, obviously, people were absolutely mortified. Um, but then actually something happened as a result of doing that. The meetings became a cherished part of Spanx culture because by normalizing that oops moment,
Mhm.
employees became more willing to take risks. So like, innovation goes with risk taking. Problems got solved because they were surfaced. And actually, the company developed more and more like a reputation for creative problem solving. Um, so essentially, by creating a culture where your team aren't terrified to fail or make a mistake, they're going to be more productive, more innovative, more engaged. And for me, that's a nice example of, quite a well-known brand doing something to instill psychological safety.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for shedding some light on that. And I've never heard of UPS meetings before. They do sound very effective. But of course, there's lots of different tactics that leaders can try to instill psychological safety in their teams.
Hmm.
And one of them is by asking your team, what is it like to be led by me? So, what does this help with?
Yeah, I think being a leader is a tough gig, right? I mean, depending at your level and your history, we meet a lot of leaders who go through a process we call the magic weekend, which is Friday I was a team member, Monday I'm a leader. The only thing that's happened in the intervening period was a weekend. And actually, that's quite a daunting thing for a leader. But there's always been this propensity to believe that you have to show up knowing all the answers, being, kind of almost faultless and, without kind of making mistakes yourself. And I think that kind of ability to reflect on your impact a little bit, reflect on the legacy and the shadow you cast becomes super important because it shapes how you show up and how your team behave. So if you never sort of stop to ask yourself the question, what's it like to be led by me? You risk leading kind of blindly by your own biases, your own assumptions, not through insight. And that reflection also builds a bit more empathy. So if you understand how you're showing up, how your behavior is landing with others, you can lead with more intention.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's such a good point. You hear quite a lot about the magic weekend, especially in contact centers where an agent's gone to be a team leader on a Monday morning and do suddenly feel like they're supposed to have all the answers. And I guess from the other side, from an agent point of view, if they've got this new team leader thinking, what they say is now gospel and they've got to follow it, it leads on nicely to the next tactic that we were going to talk about, which was about a leader saying it's okay to disagree with me. So how important is it for leaders to spell this out to their teams that that challenge is welcome?
Um, I think actually by literally saying it, the first step would be to say it's okay to disagree with me, but then importantly, here's why it matters. So there's the kind of the setting out your stall around it's okay to disagree with me and here's why it matters.
Mm.
I value your input. I don't have all the answers. We interview a lot of senior leaders, really, really kind of big hitters, right? In kind of leading sectors. And they're good not having all the answers. So we've done a series of conversations before. We've talked about life lessons you wish you knew when you were a new leader or 20 years ago or whatever.
Mm.
And nearly all of them have said, I recognize what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. And my job was to surround myself with people that backfilled my gaps essentially. So I could double down on the things I was good at. So I
Mm.
guess linking back to your question, by saying it, that's your first step, but then building rituals that kind of invite that dissent. So you could create, we talked about the oops meetings earlier.
Yeah.
But something like invite someone to be devil's advocate for the day, or have a standing agenda point, which is what are we missing? What could make the boat go faster? Another phrase we hear a lot. And I'd then guess not only by saying it and demonstrating it, but by praising people when they challenge in a constructive way.
Mm.
Um, we have this spectrum we talk about what we call illuminate awesome. So there's this concept around there's no point being a mindless cheerleader. So if you're a team leader that just says, wow, Megan, that was awesome at everything.
Yeah.
That's one end of the spectrum versus super critical, picking up on all the kind of the little kind of detail points, the things that they personally wouldn't do, rather than that sweet spot around kind of a bit of constructive challenge, but recognizing the steps they've taken. So that becomes, I think, like a self-fulfilling cycle of I'm inviting you to. I'm signposting why I value that, and I'm building rituals or habits around me that demonstrate that that's also it's not just a talking shop, it's a reality.
Mm. I think that's such a great point about the rituals, the habits, making it part of day-to-day life. Because of course, long-term success with this doesn't just come down to a one-off exercise as much as it starts with that initial self-awareness and asking those brave, bold questions to get a feel for how the team's working. It does come down to running regular safety audits and other things like that. So if we were to drill down a bit more into safety audits and longer term strategies, what does that look like over the course of a year, say?
Yeah, and I guess I know I wrote safety audit for the written piece, but I guess it sounds like overly formal.
Mm.
I guess a bit of a shift of thinking for the purpose of this could be leading with intention. So as I said in the previous point, like what's your intent? Well, a safety audit, a process, some sort of mechanism is a way that you can kind of provide some rigor. You can't fix what you don't measure or what you're not conscious of. So teams often think they're safe until you dig deeper. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Maybe, I don't know, maybe one on one you might find that someone brings something to you as a leader, but then in a group dynamic, there's stuff unsaid. So that would almost reflect you have a trust with somebody as a leader to an individual, but trust and psychological safety are they're actually separate concepts. Psychological safety is about a group dynamic.
Mm.
So as a group, you feel safe to do that. And it can be a little bit kind of invisible until it breaks or it starts to show cracks. Then it becomes painfully obvious. I think prevention's better than repair. So a
Mm.
safety audit essentially would be asking questions like, do you feel safe to speak up?
Yeah.
Um, Encouraging a bit of reflection around when was the last time someone challenged an idea? I've come with a lot of suggestions, but no one's challenged me on them. Does that mean you all agree with me? Let's drill into that a little bit. Um, if you need to kind of layer because people don't actually feel safe at the moment, you could do things like collect responses anonymously. We see a lot of surveys, interestingly, for big corporates having to be anonymous because there's a belief that actually people will be identified. I mean, that's almost like a great example of where psychological safety does not exist.
Yeah.
So collect your responses in whichever way is appropriate for your dynamic,
Mm.
then act on the feedback. Nothing kills that trust faster than asking, then ignoring. Um, and a way to do that, and I think a lot of employee engagement kind of leading companies, when they've done their employee engagement surveys, they'll invite their team to co-design fixes.
Mm.
And they'll do things like retros, or they'll do kind of working labs or whatever. And actually, that oops meeting that I spoke about earlier that Spanx do, that's kind of like a safety audit in disguise or a safety audit by another name. They
Yeah.
created a safe ritual for surfacing the problems, making it normal to talk about the failure early, and putting fixes in place.
I think that's a really nice note to end on as well, isn't it? It's making that sense of failure and the communication normal. So it's built into your culture. It's these habits, these rituals that are all coming together to build up that psychological safety over time.